Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. This is episode number 84 and today is August 18th, 2021. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about the Supreme Court striking down part of New York State's eviction moratorium. We're going to talk about what to look for when you're looking at an older home. We're going to answer some questions from housing providers around the country and so much more. Before we jump into all that, we are going to plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern on Facebook. You can also catch the replay the same day on YouTube as well. Don't forget to check out our Instagram. We post things there that don't make it on the other platforms. And last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. The current episode of the podcast takes a look at how to properly serve a notice to quit. Whether or not air conditioning units should be the landlord's responsibility or the tenant's responsibility, and whether or not you should collect a social security number on a rental application. So some good topics on the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast this week. Don't miss out on that. New episodes of the podcast drop every other Thursday over at rentprep.com/podcast or anywhere podcasts are heard. We're going to go ahead and jump into our news from around the country here, starting with this article from CNBC. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down part of New York State's eviction ban. This is obviously going to be relevant to everybody who's here in the state of New York, especially those of us locally in the Western New York region. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down at least part of New York's eviction moratorium, potentially leaving thousands of renters in the state at risk of being forced out of their homes. The court's order on Thursday focused on the state's policy of allowing tenants to self-attest that they've experienced a COVID-related hardship rather than documenting the setback with evidence. The scheme violates the court's longstanding teaching that ordinarily no man can be a judge in his own case, the majority wrote. 5 New York landlords and 1 landlords association brought the challenge against the ban. The decision could trigger a humanitarian crisis in the state, said Rebecca Garand, a legislative director at Citizen Action of New York. Given the sudden notice of the decision, we could see eviction numbers like we've never seen before. The statewide ban was supposed to be in effect through August, but now the entire protection is in jeopardy, she said. If you've had a notice of eviction served within the last 30 days, you could be evicted today. More than 830,000 tenants in New York are behind on their rent, with an average debt of $4,000. The ban was too broad and placed an enormous burden on landlords, said Olga Samaras, general counsel at the Rent Stabilization Association of New York City. All you had to do was check a box in theory, and it applied to millionaires, she said. There were stories where tenants were using the law meant to protect vulnerable New Yorkers as a sword rather than a shield to take advantage of landlords. The ruling on New York's ban is separate from the new nationwide eviction moratorium announced by CDC earlier this month. That protection applies until October 3rd and to places where COVID rates remain high. However, the ruling suggests that the broader ban may too be at risk. This is a very bad sign for how the Supreme Court is going to land and rule on the CDC's moratorium when it inevitably lands at their feet. This goes on to talk about what to do if you're worried about getting evicted. Obviously, there are resources out there for landlords and tenants. Usually you have to apply in cooperation. The tenant and the landlord both have to apply for the assistance. At least that's the case in every single piece of available funding that I've seen, including the New York State ERAP program, is that you have to have the landlord and the tenant both apply. So there are some options out there. If you're a tenant and you happen to be watching and you have some rent that needs to be paid up, there are some options out there available to you. It's just a matter of taking advantage of those opportunities. And by the way, if you apply for ERAP, make sure you provide your landlord with your ERAP confirmation number and your date of birth if they don't have it. We need both of those pieces of information in order to make the application on our side happen. Make sure you're staying in contact with your landlord if you're going this route and using these emergency rental assistances. Going back into the article itself here, I pretty firmly agree that this should have been done a long time ago, in my opinion. The fact that people have been able to self-attest and there's been no mechanism by which that self-attestation can be challenged, essentially because all the courts have been closed regardless of whether or not something could or could not be heard. It's definitely good to see that this has been eliminated. At least not eliminated. I shouldn't say eliminated. It's not that it's eliminated. It's that they have to prove the hardship, which is huge in my eyes. Further down the article, I also highlighted where it talks about the CDC order and this being a major hurdle when you talk about defending that CDC order. The president's already come out and said that he knows that the CDC order probably will not stand when it gets tested. So hopefully that one's gone too. I guess is basically what I'm not going to jump into all the politics of it, but hopefully we're moving in a direction now where things are opening up pretty much universally around the country at this point. And when we're dealing with these situations where you have essentially one industry that's being targeted and not allowed to operate the way that they need to operate, it's a very, very big headache. So I will continue to jump into it. I know that this is basically beating a dead horse, but I did want to highlight the fact that part of the New York State eviction ban, the hardship declaration with self-attestation, that is no longer valid here in the state of New York. And it sounds like we're going to be able to start challenging those cases, which is good news for every landlord that has a situation like that. Moving on to our next article. This is one that we talked about briefly last week. I highlighted an article where a tenant had killed a landlord. Here's the flip side. I mentioned this article where a landlord had shot and killed some tenants, and I wanted to make sure that I highlighted this article as well. I don't want to make things look one-sided where it's just tenants attacking landlords. This is going both directions. Smiling and laughing landlord shot 3 tenants because he did not want to go through the eviction process. A judge denied bond for an elderly landlord after a prosecutor detailed how the man allegedly shot 3 tenants for a callous reason, according to the Associated Press. He allegedly wanted to dodge the eviction process over unpaid rent. The police version of events reportedly describes the suspect's chillingly joyful behavior amid the killings. Arnoldo Lozano Sanchez, 78, was arrested on Tuesday, said the police in Las Vegas, Nevada. Authorities did not name the victims pending Clark County Coroner's Office officially determining their cause and manner of death. Sanchez is charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder. According to the officers, police found a wounded woman in a driveway on the 2000 block of West Chicago Ave, which is north of the Strip. She suffered from gunshot wounds and doctors pronounced her dead at the hospital. Surviving male victim left at the residence, also suffering from gunshots, police said. Officers learned Sanchez was still inside the home, but he surrendered without incident, cops said. Investigators said they discovered a second dead woman inside. Sanchez shot the surviving man 9 times, authorities said in the AP report. He told a witness he didn't want to go through the eviction process and that he wanted to handle it, quote unquote, his way, said Chief Deputy District Attorney Tim Fatige at the arraignment on Wednesday. Police have not found evidence linking this with a nationwide moratorium on evictions, which expired and was partially reinstated for areas seeing high rates of COVID-19. His way allegedly involved expressing glee. A male witness claimed to see Sanchez smiling and laughing after apparently shooting one of the women, and again after Sanchez barged his way into another victim room, apparently opening fire and exiting, according to the police report obtained by the Las Vegas Review-Journal. I don't know what I'm being accused of, Sanchez insisted in court, speaking through an interpreter, according to the outlet. Deputy Public Defender Sarah Hawkins requested $25,000 bail, saying it would be like having no bail at all because Sanchez said he could not afford even a penny. Justice Court Judge Joe Bonaventure ultimately denied any chance for Sanchez to see release pending trial. So yeah, I mean, this is happening. It's happening on both sides of the equation. It's happening with landlords hurting tenants. It's happening with tenants hurting landlords. And it's a bad situation no matter how you slice it. When you have entire swaths of people that are getting to the end of their rope and don't know what to do, this is the result, and it sucks. I don't think that it needed to be like this. I think that if we had a little bit more responsible look into the way that things were legislated throughout this pandemic, that we wouldn't be in this position. Other people will certainly have difference of opinion from where I'm at, but it is what it is. One more news article. This one's a lot more lighthearted. This one comes to us via Business Insider. Nearly half of all adults now want to live somewhere with easy access to camping or fishing, marking a fundamental change that's rippling through everything from housing prices to fashion. This is a pretty short article. It seems that the outdoors boom isn't dying down anytime soon. For nearly half of all U.S. adults, easy access to the outdoors for activities like hiking, fishing, or camping is very or extremely important, according to a new survey conducted by WAPO and the George Mason University School of Policy and Government. The poll was conducted among 1,000 adults between July 6th and July 21. The share of people who crave access to the outdoors has risen since 2019, when 34% listed it as a top priority, according to WAPO's Heather Long and Scott Clement. And it's in line with a trend that emerged in the early 2020s. As many indoor activities became off limits, people turned to outdoor pursuits instead. This shift has become evident in the real estate market as people have reconsidered city living in favor of somewhere where they could get outside. Over the course of the last year, home sale prices have jumped the most in Austin, Texas, Spokane, Washington, Boise, Idaho, Surprise, Arizona, and Buffalo, New York. Hey, look at that. We got mentioned. The Post points out, citing data, real estate site Redfin, what do all of these metros have in common? Easy access to a range of outdoor activities, from skiing to hiking to water sports. It's been a boon for purveyors of camping equipment, fishing paraphernalia, and outdoor gear. According to the market research NPD Group, online sales of camping gear jumped 50% in 2020 on items like grills, coolers, tents, hammocks, paddleboards were big sellers as well. Dick's Sporting Goods CEO Lauren Hobart said during an interview at CNBC's Evolve Global Summit earlier this year that these retail trends prove how people have fundamentally changed their lifestyle during the pandemic. People will certainly go back and take vacation, she said. There may be more discretionary income in the market, but I think there's been a permanent shift toward outdoor living and active living and also athletic apparel. Dick's has benefited from these shifts. The company beat analyst estimates for its first quarter earnings, reporting 150% year-over-year increase in same-store sales during its first fiscal quarter, which ended May 1. Dick's also raised its full-year financial outlook, a signal of strong momentum in the industry. I think we're going to stop that article there. We don't need to continue with it. You get the general idea. But it is interesting to me that we are starting to see this trend of people looking for residences in places where outdoor activities are more prevalent. The one thing I can say is living here in Western New York, I went to a wedding last weekend, as a matter of fact, and weekend before, can't remember. But regardless, when we came back through, we passed one of the county fairs, and there was a line of traffic waiting to get into that county fair, larger than I had ever seen for this county fair. And it shows me that people want to get back outside. They want to start living life again, things of that nature. And being outside is, in theory, one of the safer places you can be, depending on your thoughts on that whole situation. I'm not going to jump into that. But it seems that more and more people are making decisions based on the availability of activities that don't require you to be inside. Of course, Buffalo being a cold weather climate means that we're basically stuck inside for half the year. But it is nice to see that people are actually making, choices based on wanting to be outdoors and looking for different styles, different lifestyle choices and things of that nature. So that's pretty cool. Go ahead and look at some funny stuff. This one comes to us via the Bathrooms from Hell edition. I don't understand what people think when they remodel bathrooms. I just don't get it. But I thought that one was kind of fun to share. Housing market of 2021, new listing coming soon. Thought that you guys might appreciate that one as well. Personally, I think that the housing market here in Western New York is doing just fine. Nice and strong. Love to see it. I like to see a rapid market. There we go. On to our questions from housing providers around the country. My tenants moved in their son and cat. Our tenants decided to have their adult son move in and his pet cat, 2-bed, 1-bath, without asking. They sent a text informing us he moved in. The tenants pay rent on time each month, are clean and nice people. The lease says no pets, but there is no clause on subleasing or moving in other people. When we purchased the property, they were already in with the previous landlord's lease. They'll be signing a new lease September 1st. What is the general rule for this? Should we run their adult child as a prospective tenant and add to the lease, or just be happy that they pay the rent unlike the other two tenants in the multifamily? So my thought on this is, boy, so kind of them to inform you that they decided they wanted to potentially violate your lease. My recommendation, start by checking your state laws regarding moving in of immediate family. In some states, if somebody wants to move in an immediate family member, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about that unless there's some sort of an occupancy standard issue or something like that. You may or may not be able to tell the tenant that their son has to go. By occupancy standards, based on what you're saying here with 2 beds and only 3 occupants, it does not appear that you're overcrowded, so I don't think that that's going to be a viable option for removal. My recommendation here would be get a rental application from the son, screen him like you would any other tenant, and add him to the lease. It sounds like the son's going to be there regardless. You might as well screen him like you would any other tenant and get him on the lease. And then you're adding one more responsible party to the lease, which is a good situation for you to be in the event that those rent payments do stop coming. Regarding the pet, you have a lease, and the lease clearly states that there's no pets. The lease is obviously between you and the parents. But it does say no pets, and that would apply to the new tenant as well. So you have a couple of options here. You can either put in place a strong pet agreement with an increase in the monthly rent, or a pet deposit, or a pet fee, whatever's allowable in your state. Please understand the difference between a pet deposit and a pet fee. Deposits are refundable, fees are not. The other option is give a notice to cure to get rid of the cat if you really don't want the animal in the house. And that might be the option that you choose to pursue. And they might actually, if he can't have his pet cat, that might actually cause the son to move out with the pet. So, you know, options to consider. You do have a couple options here. You're going to want to check into your state laws just to see what other options might be available to you, things of that nature. But it sounds to me like you're probably going to wind up with another tenant, whether you want one or not. I would probably just go ahead, screen that person, put them on the lease, and then we're all no pets company. All of our units are no pets. I would tell them that the pet has to go. When you tell them the pet has to go, you might find that the son moves out right alongside. Next question, repairs for tenants who owe rent. I'm having serious problems from my tenants. They're like the tenants from hell. They haven't paid their rent. Now the water tank broke. If I refuse to fix it, can I get in any trouble legally? Yes, 100%, you can absolutely get in trouble. My recommendation is to do some searches on warranty of habitability and how it relates to you as a housing provider. I think those rules differ a little bit from state to state, so you might want to check specifically your state. Here in New York, no hot water would be a violation of the warranty of habitability, regardless of the rent payment status. So it doesn't matter here in New York State if the tenant is current or if they owe you 18 months of rent. You still have a duty to repair that hot water tank. I understand it's frustrating. We've been through it several times now. It's not fun, but it is a requirement, at least here in the state of New York. This is going to become a larger and larger issue as these moratoria drag on. Landlords are not all rich, and people seem to forget that fact. I've quoted the statistic before that over 75% of landlords are only in possession of like 1 or 2 units, like a single family they inherited from a family member, or they had to move for work, or maybe they bought a duplex and, you know, whatever. Most landlords only have 1 or 2 units, 1 or 2 rentals. It's not like everybody's running around here with 75, 100, 1,000 doors. And if a part of your tenancy is not paying rent, then you still have all of those other tenants to offset that risk. On small buildings, there's a lot of risk, especially if you have a tenant that stops paying you for up to 18 months. Sometimes there simply is no money for repairs in those instances because there's been no money that's come in for 18 months. Unfortunately, that housing provider still has a responsibility to conduct those repairs to maintain that warranty of habitability, whether or not the rent money is coming in. Are there landlords who are ignoring it? Yeah, absolutely. Of course there are. But do you really want to be that guy? So I feel for you, but do yourself a favor and fix that hot water tank before this turns into a bigger issue. Some people will take this to the extreme and try to get the unit condemned to get the non-paying tenants out because it doesn't have hot water. It's got to be condemned. I recommend against that. I think it's a really poor decision because even if you succeed, even if you get the unit condemned and you get the tenant forced out of the unit, you still have to go through the process of getting the unit removed from the condemned list. And it might be a lot more expensive than you think if the city or town or municipality comes in and says, well, since the unit's condemned, now you have to bring everything up to code in order for us to issue a new certificate of occupancy. You might be in a situation where you have to do electrical updates or plumbing updates or whatever, you know, simply because you wanted to get the place listed as condemned to get rid of a bad tenant. Now it's stuck on the condemned list and it might be months before you can get it back off of there. Assuming you even have the ability to get it off there. You know, if you're struggling with a hot water tank, you're definitely going to be struggling to complete a total list of repairs that need to be completed prior to it coming off of a condemned list. So not an option that I would recommend. Some people pursue it. I think it's a really poor decision. Your mileage may vary depending on your area and other factors, but I definitely would not recommend against that. I definitely would recommend against going the condemnation route. Just fix the hot water tank. Your life is going to be so much easier in the long run. Buying older homes, what to watch out for. Does anyone have suggestions as far as looking at older real estate properties? Considering a duplex that's a little over 100 years old and the numbers look pretty solid, I'm planning 7% for maintenance and 8% for CapEx, but I want to make sure I don't walk into a foundation issue or something like that. Any suggestions or strategy that you've used on older properties? Yeah, get a damn home inspection. Choose an inspector that's used to looking at older homes. There are a lot of inspectors out there that have never been exposed to a property that's more than 20 or 30 years old because that's simply the area they work in. It's all newer build properties, and they simply don't have the exposure to older homes, older building techniques, things of that nature. Choose your home inspector based on their ability to inspect the home that you're purchasing. You want someone that's familiar with older construction homes so they understand what they're looking for. Some of the things that you need to understand that old homes come with is old technology. You're talking about things like asbestos, lead paint, knob and tube wiring, galvanized plumbing, etc. That's all stuff that you're going to want to know about when you go to buy the home, so you can think about things that need to be updated or upgraded or replaced after you purchase the property. You're going to pay special attention to things like chipping and peeling paint. If the property is over 100 years old, you're definitely going to have lead paint because lead paint was used up to 1970s. 1978, I think, is the cutoff. So you're definitely going to want to pay attention to things like chipping and peeling paint. Plumbing, you've got to make sure that you don't have a ton of old galvanized plumbing that slowly corrodes inside over the years and shuts down your plumbing throughout the building. You also want to make sure if you've got old cast iron sewer stacks and things like that, that you don't have cracks on them. Electrical, we already said knob and tube wiring is going to be one of the big things you want to look out for. Also aluminum wiring and things like that. There's a lot of things in the electrical world. Even something that's been rearing its ugly head, people that convert two-prong ungrounded outlets to three-prong outlets, but don't do any grounding on those, that's enough to fail a Section 8 inspection. So that's something to keep in mind too, ungrounded outlets. Foundation, that's another thing to consider. You might even want to have a foundation specialist come in if you have questions on the foundation, but you're not going to find a poured foundation or a cinder block foundation in a home from over 100 years ago. It's going to be stacked stone for the most part. You know, there's probably going to be some parge coating. There's probably going to be some mortar that needs to be done, things of that nature. Buying an old home is a very different experience than buying a new build. The technologies used in the olden days are very different than the technologies used today, and you really need to be on top of whether or not this property is going to perform for you as an investment, knowing that you're going to have a higher than average maintenance budget. You do mention in here that you're planning 7% for maintenance and 8% for CapEx. I applaud you for calculating for both CapEx and for maintenance. Most people will just do one or the other. Not both. I like that you have it split out, and I like that you have some good numbers in there, 7% and 8% respectively. My recommendation would be run this property at 10% and 10%. Does the deal still work if you're factoring in 10% for maintenance and 10% for CapEx? You know, the best thing you can do is play with the numbers on this to see how it's going to work out for you in the long run with a few different options. You know, play with it. Understand what it is that you're buying and whether or not these numbers are going to work for you long term or not. Just to give a quick plug, if you don't know how to do a property analysis, you can head on over to whatsdrewupto.com. If you click on the button for grab my free real estate deal analysis spreadsheet, that's a mouthful. It's a rental property calculator, essentially. You can drop in all of the information about your rental property and use that information to help yourself make educated decisions. We also have a video that's included right alongside the spreadsheet that shows you exactly how to go about using it so you understand what you're looking for, how to use the spreadsheet, and how to get the data out of the spreadsheet that you're looking for when you're analyzing these properties. Check that out today over at whatsdrewupto.com. Click on the button for the free real estate deal analysis tool. That pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of the Ask a Property Manager show. Thank you all so much for watching. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can always help us improve by dropping a question in the comments either on Facebook or on YouTube. Your question may be picked up in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content or if we brought some value to your day, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week on Wednesday, August 25th at 10 a.m. Eastern with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.